wanna say is that they don't really care about us. All I wanna say is that they don't really care about us. Tell me what has become of my rights. Am I invisible cause you ignore me? Your proclamation promised me free liberty. No, I'm tired of being a victim of shame. You're throwing me in a class with a bad name. I can't believe this is the land from which I came. You know I really do hate to see it. The government don't wanna see. But if Roosevelt was living, he wouldn't let this be known. All I wanna say is that they don't really care about us. All I wanna say is that they don't really care about us.
Originally, Robert and I were talking about just having me, Rachel, Alyssa, and Sean on the call, but I talked about how I think it's so important for people to see, like, the races that aren't being oppressed and their takes on it. Because, like, unless I read the room wrong, I'm pretty sure that you guys are all, like, for the movement. And I think it'd be really important because, A, your opinion holds more weight, and B, in this specific activity, the way the demographics are set up is that there are just far more white people than any other minority. And that's just a fact. And I think it's really impactful to see that white majority speaking out. And, you know, because, like, there's going to be a point where we talk about, like, what all can be done to help. And I think that white people talking about it and advocating for us helps a lot because your weight carries more. And so I think putting that into action during this call would be very impactful to the overall resonance of what we're trying to do right now.
I remember during 2018, we were at Stillman still, and the staff, they were talking about what the show makeup was going to be and, like, what the hair was going to be. And at the time, they had said it was going to be a ponytail, like a bump and then a high ponytail. And I remember thinking, you know, I'm just going to try and make it work and do my little puff and I'll be that. But I remember the staff asking me if I could, like, straighten my hair or if I had a straightener, and I was like, I wasn't prepared to do all this. And straightening my hair takes at least 2 hours. Like, I was like, EPL, like, it's just not gonna work. It's just not gonna work. And they asked, oh, you know, maybe you could get a weave or a wig or something. And I've never done that. And there's a reason why I've never gotten a weave or a wig. But it's just something that I've never done. So I've never learned how to take care of that sort of thing. And I remember going into the bathroom and crying because it was just one of those things. It was one of those moments where I tried to, color guard for me has always been a way of escape, kind of. And I remember growing up, I did cheer. I did cheer from 2nd grade all the way to 9th grade. And performing there's always been an issue with my hair when it came to performing and doing things like of that nature. And I remember having to get a perm put in my hair, a relaxer put in my hair, because it got to the point where during cheer we had to compete and we were traveling a lot. And so I didn't know how to straighten my hair. I was in the 7th grade at the time. I didn't know how to straighten my hair because my mom had always done it for me. And my mom, she asked, like, the coach or whatever, she's like, hey, can she just wear her hair natural? She doesn't know how to straighten it. And the coach she told us that we better figure it out. Like, and so that was our solution. We put a perm in my hair. And y'all, it was awful because I had scabs on my scalp and, like, my hair was falling out. It wasn't a fun time. And so after I quit cheer, I kind of thought, oh, that's done. That's over. Because my color guard coach, she had never said anything about my hair ever. Like, and it just was what it was, and I could, you know, do what I wanted and what I needed to do. And so 2018, that was like the first moment where it was just like, okay, Alyssa, now is this gonna happen again? Like, are things coming, what you were trying to run away from, is it coming back, sort of thing. And one of the reasons, oh, y'all, this is gonna sound off, but I remember auditioning, before I auditioned for Phantom, one of the things that I looked at was how few Black people there were. That's one of the things I looked at, and when I saw how few Black people there were, it was almost like, I don't know if I'm gonna make it in, you know? And I remember at auditions, and I've told some of the staff this story. I remember at my first audition, I wasn't worried about anyone in the room other than like the other 3 Black girls that were also auditioning for the Guard. And it just felt like, because I have this thing called the Black girl spot. I don't know if that makes sense, but every regiment Guard that I've seen anyway, there's always been that one Black girl. And to me, in my head, it was just like, there's only one of us that can take this spot. So I'm only competing against the 3 of y'all. And that's how I saw it. And I remember telling one of the staff members about that. And they were like, oh my gosh, Alyssa, no, like, it's not like that. No. And then I looked at them and said, I was like, well, ever since I've been here, there hasn't been another Black girl on the team. Like, I'll wait. Like, and so I do think when people say representation is important, that's what they mean. Like, that is what they mean. Because it really, just being an outsider and looking in, that really affected me. And because Stephanie is a minority, that was one of the things that pushed me to audition. It might sound crazy, but that was one of the things that helped get me to go. So
yeah, I definitely agree to that sentiment a lot, because I have written essays about this, and I've talked about this with like the conductor team and all that. But I went to my first drum corps show the summer of 2017, and I remember seeing the top 12 corps and thinking to myself, like, fresh out of high school, little nerd me was like, oh my gosh, I love band. This is incredible. And thinking, I would love to do this someday. But then I stopped and just looked onto the field at all the top 12 corps and realized that, like, there weren't many people of my same skin color in the corps, whether that's membership or staff or even just like the judges that were on the field. I just didn't see any representation. And like Alyssa said, representation matters so much. And that's not even a term that necessarily only applies to younger generations, because I was a whole 18-year-old person. I was a legal adult, and that deterred me from auditioning for 2 whole years. And it really just took me one day up and just deciding, like, I'm just going to do it. I'm probably not going to make it, but I'm just going to do it. Go ahead and go for it. And I remember training for it and thinking that I have to not be so good that I'm satisfied. I need to be so good that they cannot deny me. Like, that is the limit that I was pushing myself to. And I feel like not necessarily trying to speak on behalf of like white people, but I feel like the white auditionees like get themselves to where they're like, this is good enough to like get me a spot, but not good enough to be the ultimate best person there, because they don't have to really think about that. Whereas I was like, I'm competing against not necessarily a bunch of other people, but a whole nother race for this spot. And it was because I didn't see that representation that I was just had this notion in my mind that it was taboo. And especially since I was going for the role of conductor for the Phantom Regiment, it didn't seem feasible or tangible just because I didn't see the representation on the field that year. And I think it's something really important to be brought up drum corps wise, because things need to change. And I got into a really good discussion with Geneva about this the other day regarding like the audition process and inclusivity. So Geneva, if you'd like to speak on that.
Are you supposed to run the podcast?
I was talking about when you were talking about how, like, if we want to really get the best out of everything, then we need to.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yes. Also, I'm hearing an echo from myself. Do you guys hear that?
Mhm.
Oh, it stopped.
I don't hear it.
Okay, never mind. Yeah, I was talking about one of the most, I guess, disheartening things about inequality in general and oppression in general. One of the more practical ways to think about what is being lost from the standpoint of really all of humanity, or within kind of the microcosm that is a single organization, is all the lost potential for what that organization or the world could be. If you think about, from an actual anthropological, biological, and social science perspective, there's no definitive way to tell whether or not another person is of a certain race from a biological standpoint. Like a person's alleles of the two people of European descent, and their alleles may match better with an Asian man than they would each other. That's a possible thing. You can't say that we are different from a biological standpoint. With that said, if every able-bodied human being has the same potential to be good at music, to be good at various fields of study, to be good at performing, to learn at the same rate and capacity as the person next to them, regardless of their biological makeup, which we just proved is not indicative of race, then that means that all of the minorities or marginalized groups of people that don't see themselves represented in these cores, all those people that don't go to audition, is just lost talent and potential. The talent pool gets so much smaller. You're looking at mainly white students who, have a very specific background, who may or may not be actually the best ones for the job or the best ones on the field. But you'll never know as an organization if you don't make efforts to make sure that people, regardless of their identity, racially, their sex identity, or their sexual orientation, they need to see themselves represented so that they show up to those auditions and they're not discounted in that talent pool. I know this general conversation is not a conversation about women, but this is just an analogy or a transferable kind of information. Is, it's commonly believed and supported by economists that the world's best economies are the ones where there's the most gender equality. And that isn't just some happy coincidence. It's because when you are making sure that half of the population is being treated and given the same economic opportunities as the other half of the population, roughly, then that means you're doubling the amount of minds that are able to work in service jobs, in STEM jobs, in creative jobs, in executive positions. You're doubling the amount of those incredible minds by making sure that there's equality to give them opportunities to exercise that intelligence. At the same time, when we're thinking about Phantom or any drum corps, think about all of the marginalized groups of people within our own drum corps, within the drum corps community, within performance organizations, and how many minds that we're just refusing to multiply, or how many bodies we're refusing to give a learning opportunity because we aren't taking the time to make sure that they're being represented so they show up at auditions and increase that talent pool. That's lost potential, not just for the marginalized groups, but for white people, but for the straight white cis men. And we should not care about equality because as if someone is privileged, I am very privileged in very, very many ways. So me as a privileged person, I shouldn't care about equality for Black Americans or for other people of color or for people in other marginalized groups because it benefits me. But if we have to tackle it from that practical standpoint, if you need a reason to believe in equality and find some way that it benefits you, that's the reason. We will all be held back so long as some are held back, and that's just not a fun thing to say. Literally and actually, success will not be true and at its fullest potential unless we give everyone the opportunity to show their potential.
Yes.
Something that I feel really helpless about when we look at inequality and underrepresentation in drum corps is absolutely drum corps is not doing the best to encourage that diversity, but I also feel like it starts so far before drum corps is even in the picture that we get to this time of our lives and the activity is at such a disadvantage, or not the activity, I mean, I guess the activity too, but people of color are at such a disadvantage because systems work against them, like from the very time that they're born, that kind of prevent them from even being exposed to this world, and I thought about this a lot as a woman too. But this is just an example, again, using women because I don't know. I honestly don't know what the examples are, and maybe you guys can share as people of color. But just looking at bands, there are definitely, for some reason, instruments are gendered. Girls should play flutes and boys should play trumpets. And I don't know why that is. And I think we're getting better, but I definitely think that notion still exists, and there are still band directors who push that notion. And I think that contributes to why, we have so little representation of women. That is definitely getting better. It's definitely not as bad as people of color. But, and then I hear people say just get more women to audition. Or I'm sure they say just get more people of color to audition. And it's not that simple because there are so many other factors that play into that are preventing them other than just not auditioning. And I wonder what you guys feel like are examples of that for people of color.
I mean, I feel like...
No, you're good. You're good, Rachel. Go.
No, I was just going to say, I definitely get what you mean about, it starts from so much earlier. Because, I was just talking to somebody about how I played trumpet for, 12 years, and, just now when Phantom was selling horns is the first, professional horn I've ever earned. For the last 12 years of me playing, trumpet, I haven't, had a real horn. Or, had even, a nice mouthpiece, before I merged Phantom. I've never, taken lessons. I didn't, that was just, not accessible. And so, I remember, auditioning for drum corps, and I came in, and I was it's, so far down, on the priority list. And, how Alyssa talked about having, a black girl spot. I was there's a black girl spot, there's a girl spot. So it's it's the white guys are up here, and the white girls are right here, and then the black people are right here, and the black girls are right here. And it was how am I supposed to compete with that? And I thought it was funny what Beaven said, because I grew up in a household that taught you that as a black person, you had to be twice as good at anything to get half the recognition. And so it's always been I can't just be good at it. I have to be so undeniable that they don't have a choice, because if they have a choice, it's not going to be me, sort of thing. And so it's definitely far before 16, 17, 18-year-olds doing drum corps. It's the beginning. So I see where you're coming from with that.
Sean, did you have something?
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's not. I mean, I might echo again.
A little bit.
A little bit. Okay.
It's not bad.
Okay, cool. It's not necessarily related to drum corps, but I know a lot of kids that have been in a lot of activities that I've participated in, a bunch of sports and regular concert bands, and they'll be so passionate about it, and we'd all grow up in these households that would tell us, hey, we need to do this because I did this, and there's a lot of misinformation and just bias because, like, oh, we strive in this, so we should continue doing this because that's what we can do good. And I've just seen a lot of people do things that they didn't care about throughout most of their teenage life and now into their adult life, all because of something that they've grown up believing was what they had to do to be successful instead of doing what they want to do. And that's why, like, being here today and like being able to like talk about this stuff with my friends and do something that I didn't think I'd be able to do or didn't think that was for me when I was younger is so amazing that opportunities open because people open their mind up, and not everyone is as educated as they should be, and that is just something that we need to work forward to actually educate everyone and make sure that everyone knows that there's a place for anyone, anywhere. And it doesn't matter, what your parents did, what anyone did before you. Like, what's important is that you pursue what you want to pursue. And people need to understand that it doesn't matter who you are. There's a place for someone, and if someone wants a spot, like, they should be there. If they can take that spot, they should be there if they want it.
Okay, to kind of put the topic more on the nose of what is going on right now. So in America, we are currently in a state where the risk of Black lives being taken is now at just the top of everyone's radar. And the Black Lives Matter movement kind of got its first push back in 2014 with the murder of Tamir Rice and countless other innocent Black people. And that kind of got swept under the rug and doled out. But due to the recent deaths of people like George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, the spark of Black Lives Matter has kind of been reignited, and it is bigger and more powerful than it was the first time. And we, Black people are just not even Black people, just people who believe that Black Lives Matter are now hitting the streets and peacefully protesting. Some of the protests are turning into riots. But we are all fighting for the general cause of equality for Black lives, because Black lives are the most at risk right now for no reason at all. I want to take this time to just kind of have me, Alyssa, Rachel, and Sean talk about our perspectives of this matter. And then Geneva, Claire, Megan, Hannah, Tyler, if you guys want to chime in, I would love that. So for me, I remember the first, I guess, surge of the Black Lives Matter movement happened, and I was just kind of in a state of shock because I grew up in a pretty, I guess you'd say, white part of town where like a majority of the people that I was around were white. And so I didn't necessarily see this injustice firsthand until I saw it start popping up in the news. And that's when I knew how big of an issue it actually was. And being from the background that I am from, I just kind of had the notion that like the civil rights movement happened and then it got to where it was, and that this is how things are. But that was a kind of a clear reminder that it's not over. The fight has not been won yet, and we are still fighting. And I remember when it resurged, just feeling this pit in my stomach because I knew that it was still happening, and I knew that because of media and all that, it had been swept under the rug, but I didn't do anything about that until it started being an issue again. And I think I felt the pit because A, Black people are getting murdered for no reason. And those are human beings. Like, this has nothing to do with politics. This is about human lives. And I just empathized so hard with all of the families And at this point, this was like, I guess, my personal breaking point. And I knew that I couldn't just sit around and be idle. And so I knew I had to do something about it. And yeah, and my family came here from Africa back in like 2001 so that we had a better opportunities for me, my brother, my sister, education-wise and all that. And it's just so frustrating that we came this way for better opportunities, and yet this is the equality that we saw in the nation that we saw better than ours. So that's how I've been viewing this whole thing. Alyssa, do you want to go next?
Sure. Like you did, Bevan, I grew up in a part of town that more white, I guess you could say. And I knew these things were happening, and I would always hear about it in the news, and my mom would tell me stories about where she grew up and what happened to people that she knew. But I think now more than ever, it's more in my face. And so it's just I don't know, man. It's very obviously it's very hard to watch. And, you know, I've been reading a lot of things, and to me, it's more disheartening to think, because there's a part of my mind that thinks everyone's talking about it now, and it's a really big thing now. But what happens like in 2 weeks when people stop talking about it? Like, is it just gonna die? That's kind of where I'm at. I'm kind of just waiting to see if things will change, because like we said, the Black Lives Matter movement has not, it's not brand new. It's not. So I'm just wondering how things are going to change and what things are going to be put in place, because it has to be drastic, and like we have to do a 180 somehow. And I don't know how it's going to happen or when it's going to happen, but yeah.
Rachel?
It's definitely a situation. I had been talking with my friend the other day, and I was trying to figure out why now. And I don't know if it's the pandemic. I don't know if people are at home and don't have a choice but to watch the news or do whatever to keep themselves entertained. But like, you know, like the whole movement and everything, like this isn't new. And I get that people that are like in, you know, predominantly white neighborhoods or schools or whatever, like they're not exposed to it, but like it just struck me as so strange, because every single time one of those people like come on the news, you get a new name. It was Trayvon, it was Brianna, like that broke my heart. And I was like, how is that not enough? And I remember I told my friend, I was like, when, like like how many lives are too many? Because it should be one, you know? And like to think that we've gotten to this point where people can go to, you know, protest with signs with just endless names. And it's like, how can you think that that was okay up until now? And so just like Alyssa said, in 2 weeks, when, like, if we're out of quarantine or whatever and it's not in your face anymore, then what? Like, is it back to not mattering, and do 10 or 15 or 20 or 100 more people have to get murdered before it's bad again? Like, I don't know. That's my thing right now.
Sean?
Yeah, I mean, I share the same opinions as you guys. I definitely did grow up in a pretty nice neighborhood. I went to a predominantly white school. There were, I think, like 12 kids in the district are of color. And, you know, I never really experienced it all that much. And I would hear about it all the time in the house. And I remember when I first got my license, I got this big talk from my parents about how, like, hey, you know, you can like drive, you got your license, like congrats, but be careful. And that was something I didn't necessarily understand why I should be careful, because I hadn't been in any situations, but I've seen things, you know, and you don't think that like it could happen to you, but I mean it happens to so many other people. And the fact that like I went outside for a run today for all this like regiment stuff, and I looked at everyone different, and I felt like they looked at me differently. You know, I didn't feel safe in my own neighborhood, even though I've lived here all of my life. And one of the most puzzling things is, I think, like all these cop statements and everything that's going on with all these cops being fired, and like people can still comment on it. You know, like these cops can still have their opinions and see what their fellow officers are doing and support them when it's a life that's lost that was so important to everyone else in their life, and they just took it, and then it's okay because they were protesting for something that means a lot to them. And just evaluating the fact that people are struggling a lot, and they've been struggling for years, and people can be so insensitive and ignorant about those sorts of things just because they don't believe that they have it any different than they do. Yeah.
Anyone else like to talk about their experience? Yeah, Geneva?
Rachel and Alyssa, well, I think, the first thing I want to make note of is I have also grown up in a really predominantly white and privileged environment. And it's really interesting that that's the trend. That is the trend for most people of color participating in the arts beyond public school education. I just wanted to throw that out there. That's a trend in general. I mean, I did these observations from my anthropology class of the music building, just really basic field research and just writing some observations. And the music building had ratios that matched kind of, levels of oppression that different groups face. Majority of everyone in that music building was a white person. And then the next group of people were really really fair Asians and really fair Hispanics, and then the darker Asians and Hispanics, and then the light-skinned Black Americans, and then the darker-skinned Blacks. And that'll be a trend that you can find pretty frequently everywhere, especially because we view music as a luxury, and it takes all of these things to make it happen, but it definitely puts people at disadvantage. Anyway, so I wanted to speak to Alyssa and Rachel about, the silence being, we don't want this to lose momentum. And I just wanted to be realistic in saying that I think it has a lot of potential to lose momentum right now. One really great thing about the information era is that we get a lot of information really quickly. There's this instant gratification that we can obtain just from the way that technology is now. People have access to these resources they've never had before. All of that's great, but it can also just retract in a second. And when I was in high school, I participated in the spoken word community really heavily. The local community in Dallas had a really great kind of environment there and really great spoken word community there. And there were a lot of Black people that would come and speak about their experiences and write poetry and perform their art. And I listened to their experiences, and I had all this fire and all this motivation. And this was around the time of Trayvon, and kind of the first slew of names that got everyone's attention. And so there was poetry every weekend about the Black Lives Matter movement and about police brutality, and it meant so much to me then. But I have to be honest in saying that when I gave up spoken word poetry just because of my own time commitments, I gave up on wanting to educate myself more past that point. I did, and that's my fault. I only cared to listen when it was convenient to the art that I wanted to participate in. It was like learning about other people's experiences that don't look like me was just a side effect of me being involved in an art that had more people of color in it. But it should have been the other way around. it should have been me using art to connect with people that don't look like me, and constantly trying to find ways to connect with people who don't look like me, even if that means I give up that art, or if I give up the circumstances that make it easy for me to listen. And that was one of the first things I thought about when all this stuff came out again, was that I would like to think that I'm a person with a specific set of experiences, and certain biases in society work against me, though they are not the same as another person's injustices or inequalities that they face. But because of that, I used to think that I was educated on racial inequality in America enough. But the problem is that I thought the enough part. And I thought it was just enough to respond after something happened and when it was convenient for me, as opposed to constantly speaking about something hard when it is hard, and constantly speaking about something that's hard before something bad happens. And I felt really guilty about that. Just yesterday, actually, I called Bevan and I told him that I'm sorry on behalf of how the country has been handling the current situations, and I'm individually sorry, because part of the reason why it's escalated to this point is because I was silent up until this point, or even if I wasn't silent, I wasn't loud enough, and it took this much for me to care this much now. Even when I knew how much gravity the situation had before, and I just gave up on it once it got hard. So I'm sorry, again, on behalf of the country and individually for that, but this isn't about my guilt. I just wanted to speak realistically about how it is really easy to let this lose momentum, even as someone who thinks that they know enough, quote unquote, about inequality.
I think that's important for us to all like look at and admit to ourselves as people who aren't Black and haven't had that experience. Like, I grew up in a military town near St. Louis, so it's super conservative. I grew up in a really liberal household, and I'm obviously very liberal. And now on social media, I have no fear sharing my opinions about, different social issues. But it definitely wasn't like that. It definitely wasn't like that my first year marching, or even most of this past year. And I grew up, Ferguson was my backyard. And I, again, remember in a very politically active family, seeing all of these things happen on the news, hearing about all of them. And I never paid attention. I never spoke up about Black lives and Black inequalities and experience until right now. And I never felt like it really affected me. I felt like Ferguson being in my backyard, I grew up, again, in a very white town. I had friends who were people of color, but it never hit so close to home until I've had experiences getting so close to Geneva and even you, and talking about that experience, and talking to you about, not being able to go to a protest because even you could lose your life for just speaking out about it. And I feel like very ashamed, but again, like Geneva, I think it's so important to look inward and talk about, I never felt like this affected me until it is far, far, far too late.
I completely agree with that, Claire. And I think looking at my childhood, there was so much that was catered to being white that I didn't even notice until this started to resurface again. Band-Aids, flesh color, always white. Like the simplest thing that I never thought about, but why aren't there flesh colored Band-Aids that are for our friends of color? It's the little things like that. When I would scrape my knee and my mom would be like, oh, here's a Band-Aid. And maybe that wasn't the intention, but it is still there and it's still a problem. And I think I can speak for the people in this chat who are white, that we until now didn't understand how much of a problem it was. because we are white. And that is like such a shame and guilt filled thing to realize, but at the same time, it's necessary because like we have this privilege that we simply have because we were born like this. And that's like, I don't understand that. And I know that I may never understand that because I don't think there's anything that could ever make it make sense to me. But I agree with Geneva and Claire that like I'm ashamed of the fact that I didn't think it affected me, or that a lot of it I was just completely unaware of because of the way the media is catered to white people and to telling the white people about great things white people are doing, but not the bad things white people are doing, or the way that something that is shared so often is so-and-so committed a crime, but it's not, you know, this crime happened, it's a black person did something. But when a white person commits a crime, the way that the news headlines are presented are, you know, like mentally unstable white man, not this white man murdered somebody. Like, and it's just the more I learn, the more I am enraged. And I think that's good. But yeah, it's just very heavy. And I am so sorry that you guys have carried that weight on your own for so long. And I hope that we can learn some ways as things continue to help support you and to help fight for you, because you deserve it. And you always have, and you always will.
I just want to say I'm sorry because I've talked to all of you individually. And even like when I saw that song, you have to feel that way.
You froze a little bit
And
right
kind of
there.
leave your house. Oh, am I back?
Yeah, you said the song.
Oh yeah, I watched the video that you posted on Facebook, and I thought about how horrible it must be to just feel afraid every time you leave your house. And Rachel, I remember you telling me like, oh, I might have to take out my braids because they won't fit under my helmet. And I remember Alyssa, like I would come in the bathroom during EPL and you're like rushing to try to get your hair done. And I just felt so horrible because I just always thought like you had the most beautiful natural hair. And I know that's so much work. And Sean, like you're just typecast constantly and it's horrible. It's like, you're just a really good snare drummer. Can we just call it what it is? You're just a really good snare drummer who's really good at your job. And Geneva, I remember you telling me that there was a man that assumed that you didn't speak English. And I'm just like, I'm hearing you guys talk about it now, and it's just, I'm so sorry that you have to feel that way in a country that's supposed to make everyone feel equal and free and at home. And I know that's not the place that we're in, and I'm sorry that you have to experience this.
Yeah.
I remember. I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I remember having a conversation with Geneva, and it was at the very end of the season, and it was something that you know what I'm talking about, girl, don't you? It was something that I had been battling in my head for so long that season and holding it back, and it would always play in the back of my mind, but I never wanted to admit it, and I never wanted to like, I guess I just never, a lot of times I just don't want to face things for what they might be. And so y'all know how I was supposed to play like the, excuse my French, badass Joan or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I looked at how, and bless her soul, like I love Emily. I love Emily Marcus. But it was one of those things where I realized in my head, I was realizing that she was portrayed as the baby Joan that's pure and innocent. And I was supposed to be like the badass Joan. And, you know, the strong black woman is something that replayed in my head. And, you know, the angry black woman is something that played in my head when I really thought about it. And, you know, Emily and I are so different, like physically, looks wise. We're so opposite. And that always played in my head. And I always wondered, like, why did I get that part? I have to wonder if it's because they really thought that I could do that part and that I was talented enough to do that part, or because I fit the look, I guess, you know? And so that ate me so hard, like throughout the whole season. But I always pushed it away because I'm like, no, so you're fine. Like that's not what it's about. It's not what it's supposed to be. But it still played, and it still affected me, you know?
I remember that conversation, Alyssa.
To kind of, so the song that Megan was talking about, the lyrics were, was that the last time that I'll hug my mother? Was it the last that I'll see my sister and brother? I have no weapons, but I know within the only threat is my skin. Was it the last time that I'll see my friends smile? Was it the last I'll go on walks for a while? Things need to change. America should rearrange. And all this death I can't believe. Cops, please stop. I can't breathe. And it's really disheartening because those are thoughts that I live through every day, just existing. And I think it's really backwards and twisted that the people who are supposed to protect me from those thoughts coming to fruition are the people that I'm scared of. And I think that just like growing up in Black families, the things that little Black kids are told by their parents are starkly different than what white kids are told. Because I remember being told that if I go out, have a friend, and if I don't, then I need to walk a certain way. If I wear a hoodie, I can't have the hood on. I cannot have my hands in my pockets. I need to have my hands out. I can't look at the ground. I don't look anyone directly in the eye, though, but don't look down at the ground. Walk to where you don't look suspicious, but not as if you're trying to not look suspicious. Like, these are things that were just ingrained in me, and it sucks that that's just mainstream, like that's just how it is, and it shouldn't have to be that way. Because I'm sure I can ask any of my white friends if they ever got any of those talks, and they will say no, because they don't have to worry about those things. Do any of you guys like to speak on that?
I was gonna say, similarly to Bevan, it's wild that the people that are supposed to, you know, protect you are so scary, like to us. And you know, like when I was a senior in high school, so like 3 years ago now, I got pulled over at a red light. So nobody was driving. There was a cop behind me, turned his lights on, and he got out of his car. He banged on my window. And I remember the first thing I did is I picked up my phone, which probably wasn't a good idea. But I picked up my phone and I called my mom. Because I wanted there to be evidence if anything happened, you know?
Yeah, there was a time where I was driving at night, and I had just made a left turn onto a bridge where there weren't any street lights, and it was nighttime, and a cop turned on its lights. And I remember seeing that and immediately texting my family and being like, hey, I just got pulled over in a dark place. I'm not sure how this is going to end. I love you. Like, that was the first thought that I had. And the reason they pulled me over was because one of my license plate lights was out. And yet I feared for my life, knowing that I did nothing wrong. And I think that's where the problem really stems from, is the fact that we can't live our lives comfortably because we always have to have our guard up no matter where we are. And to kind of reel it back, the Black Lives Matter movement like, I see a lot of negative things that people are saying because they're like, well, they want to get rid of the police force, so who's going to protect us and all that. I think that our main objective is to just have justice. I think that if the police force is held accountable for the things that they do, for the murders that they commit, with no extra stipulations just because they're cops, I think that that is a step in the right direction. And I think that if that point cannot be met, that is when we need to start reconstructing the entire thing. And people that chalk up the protesting and the police's intervention in said protesting to being because they got rowdy and things, I disagree, because a couple weeks ago, a lot of white people were protesting the stay-at-home order by rallying with firearms on them, and the cops did nothing. If anything, the cops stood by them when they did that, and then they immediately got their way. Like, I remember that being a 2-week thing. And so they were literally protesting and rallying with loaded firearms, and we are protesting and rallying with our fists to the sky, hoping for equality, and the police are intervening. And then with the newly instituted curfew, people are saying that that's just because they want to keep things safe at night and all that. But there is a whole pandemic going on, and yet no curfew has been set to try and keep people in from the death of a virus. But now cops are implementing a curfew during protests so that they have a reason to step in and make arrests once it's past that curfew. And just, there are barriers that just keep getting put up to try and stop this from happening that were not put up when our white counterparts were doing the exact same thing weeks ago.
For haircuts.
And Olive Garden dinners.
It seems just so easy for the protests and all that to come to the conclusion of the government reopening for haircuts and Olive Gardens and bowling alleys, but it's so difficult for us to get justice for the right to live. That's my biggest issue with this entire thing. Would you guys like to speak on that? Yeah, Gina.
Sean, go ahead.
Okay. I know that this doesn't, it's not exactly like towards racism or anything like that, but on the police thing, of how, like, I've been seeing a lot of things of how, like, regardless of newscasters, like, political views or like what sides they lean towards, I've been seeing a lot of stuff about how they're just like firing on them, and you know, they are claiming, you know, like, hey, I have my hands up, I'm not even here for the protest, I'm just here, you know, film it, you know, document what's going on in the world right now so that people can be aware of what's happening. And they're firing on them and arresting them, you know, shooting, asking questions later. And that's been happening, you know, with people of color for years now. And I feel like there's more reaction to that than there is the fact that people of color have been dying every day.
And also, just to piggyback off that, sorry, Geneva, but I don't know if you guys have ever seen rubber bullets. I would entice you all to look them up. They are large. They're like this
Huge.
big. And to the people that are saying the rubber bullets are used because people got rowdy, rubber bullets' intended use is to be shot at the ground so that it keeps people from advancing. But they're being targeted at people's faces. So even if there was a reason to use them, they're misusing them to target for no reason. Geneva?
I was just going to say that I was listening to this really great video the other day. I know that he is left-leaning or far left-leaning, but I think he made some really great points as a Black person and a well-informed Black person. But Trevor Noah, he had this really great video, and he brought up the social contract that we all have as human beings to the society that we are a part of, which basically implies that when you are born into a society, you sign this invisible contract with that society and its rules, saying, I will follow these rules so long as these rules are enforced justly among everyone else, including myself, included in this society. And that is the enforcing thing that is the main incentive to follow the law in this concept. And this isn't a concept that's recent. This is like around the same time as, you know, our really basic ideologies that we praise our founding fathers for building this country on. So it's not something that's just been made to support this current movement. This is something that applies to all human beings. When you are part of a society, you agree to follow those laws so long as those laws are equally enforced. And, you know, one really great thing that he said was, just imagine if every day that contract is being ripped up by the other party when it comes to you and your people. So if you have opinions on how people protest and how protesters are handling things and what it means whenever they break the law or whenever they are acting on things now, or if they're angry, etc., 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 just try to imagine if the one reason that you have to follow any rules in society, that one contract is just, it's void at this point, you know, because it's clearly working for white people and other people of color proportionally a lot more. So we still have incentive to follow. You know, we still have incentive for this justice system because it's only just to us, and it's favoring us, and it's benefiting us. But there's no real incentive for Black Americans, and I don't mean to speak on behalf of Black Americans, but there's no real incentive for anyone who is being treated unjustly by the law to follow the law after that's been done. And that's been done, as we've seen now, after more and more names than we can even count. So that's just, I think, something to think about, again, from a practical standpoint. If it's so hard to empathize with others, even just from this practical standpoint, from actual scholarly ideas that we've supported for centuries, just thinking about how that applies to our modern perspectives today.
All of the things we stand on as being proud of as America, like, those freedoms weren't won with peace. Like, America's freedom was a war. Like, LGBTQ rights, Stonewall riots, like, that was not won with peace. Slavery was not oppressed for hundreds of years, and their voices stifled for hundreds of years. They've been trying to fight this with peace. And also, I feel like as white people, we are in absolutely no place to critique the way that people are choosing to protest, because we are not having our innocent family members murdered in the streets by those who have sworn to protect us. And I will never, ever have to fear being pulled over. I've argued with police. I've gotten out of more, I'm kind of what is it called? Like, heavy-footed. I'm a fast, aggressive driver. So I've been pulled over a fair amount of times. I have gotten out of more tickets than I have ever been given tickets. And I'm sure that has something to do with me being a cute little blonde girl, white girl. And I, again, have never, ever feared for my life in any situation around police, period. And I will never have to fear my dad going to the store and that being a death sentence. I will never have to fear my sister walking home with Skittles and that being a death sentence. And that is a reality for Black people. Them existing, what they look like, is a death sentence, period. And yet we can arrest white school shooters without a scratch.
Yeah. So Black Lives Matter. What does it mean? To me, at least, it just means that Black lives are more in danger, and we need to see that they are human beings. Skin color has nothing to do with that. They are not a threat. They are human beings. We are human beings. Like, it's just that plain and simple. And to the people combating it by saying all lives matter, even if it isn't necessarily directed to combat it, it is, because that's what it was created for. It was created to dissolve and dilute the impact and power of Black Lives Matter. I doubt that any of the Black people that I know or the Black people that are protesting will say that all lives don't matter, because we believe that all human lives matter. That is a fact. However, to put it into my favorite analogy of this whole thing, if there is a house on fire, the firemen are going to go put that house out. That doesn't mean that the house that's next to it that isn't on fire isn't as important of a house. It just means that the house that is on fire needs the most attention right now. That is the Black lives in America. You being in the house next to it, does that, like, yeah, you have a higher risk of catching a flame, but you're not at risk right now. That is not the point. The house that is on fire needs to be put out first. Like, we all believe that we're all equal. We're trying to make everyone else believe that we are all equal. If your friend broke their leg and had a cast, would you complain that you don't have a cast on your leg? If your friend got into a car accident and got a new car, would you be like, oh my gosh, why don't I have a new car if your car's working perfectly fine? This is, if, last one, sorry. If you are dehydrated, or if your friend is dehydrated and gets a sip of water and you're fine, are you going to look at them and be like, how dare you drink water right now in front of me? It's about risk and not just negating all of the other lives.
Yeah.
That's why we need to realize that Black lives matter. And the way that things are just set up in America, equality-wise, here's white people, here's Black people, and all the other races are in between. And if we can get it to where Black lives legitimately matter in America, then that will help the rest of the races. Like, for example, when coronavirus hit, all of the Asian lives were going through a bunch of hate, physical, emotional, like they were getting abused just because the disease originated in Asia. And we see and we recognize that. But right now, we need to get the bottom of the barrel fixed up before we can fix anything else. That is what Black Lives Matter means. Any of you like to chime in? Sorry, I kind of popped off there.
No, Vivian, you did great. You popped off for me. Like, that was, yeah.
All right. So racism. What I'm gonna just ask Alyssa, Rachel, and Sean, like, what do you guys wish that people who don't have to deal with it knew about racism?
I think one of the most, did I sound okay? Do I sound okay? Okay. It's one of those things that Hannah had mentioned earlier. It's the things that you don't even, it's the things that you don't even think about. Like, I remember in 2018, gosh, there were, I hated wearing my warm-up tights. I hated wearing them because they were so, I called them ghost tights because they were so ghostly, and the contrast between my skin and the tights was so stark. It was wild, and it was embarrassing for me to wear. Like, I was embarrassed to wear those tights, and so I didn't wear them until the staff was like, "Hey, everyone has to wear tights." You know, I was like, "Okay, well, you know, I'll follow the rules because like they're the rules, so I'm gonna have to wear these tights." And so it was one of those things like, "Liz, you got to get over it. Wear the tights." Well, we took this photo shoot or whatever outside before one of the shows, and everyone started making it their background on Facebook, and I was just like, oh my god. And people started like asking me about it. They were like, so like, what's up with your legs? Where did your legs go, Liv? Like, what's going on? And I remember it was the last week. It was the very last week of drum corps. And one of the sewing ladies had finally said something about it, and she got me, I like to call them my POC tights. And, you know, it's just one of those things you don't, unless you're going through it, you don't really think about it that much. So I think it's important. I think it's always in the forefront of my mind because it's happening to me. So it just makes sense. But I think one of the most important things to realize is that it's going to be the things that you don't see. But when someone says something about it, like listen up, you know, listen to them, because they've been going through it more than you've even thought about it. So,
Rachel?
I think I would say that I wish people knew the weight of the things they say and the way that they say them. Because I feel like a lot of people, like, I'm not racist because I don't say, like, bad things. Like, I don't say bad things are awful and, like, you know, stuff like that. But it's not always just what you said. So, like, the experience that I have, that I think about this every day. Every time I pick up my trumpet, I think about this. And I know that, you know, this person probably never thought about it again. But I had a tech that essentially told me that I couldn't play trumpet. I shouldn't play trumpet. I should pick a new instrument. I've been playing it for 12 years, but, like, you're just bad at it. And I was like, okay, well, I hear you. You know, that's fair. Like, is there anything I can do to, you know, be better? Is there, like, an exercise or, like, a warm-up? Or, like, do you have any advice for me? Because, like, I valued this person's opinion really highly, and they were pretty much like, you're terrible. And I was like, okay, but, like, is there anything, like, can I fix it? And they pretty much said to me, I can't help you because I don't teach people like you. And I was like, what does that mean? Like, I genuinely was like, I don't understand. And they were like, you know, I don't teach trumpet players that have lips as big as you do. And I was like, I don't know, like, it's, I don't want to say fair, but, like, it's understandable if you genuinely teach, like, a demographic that's mostly white, but it came off as, like, you have big lips, you're out of luck, like, you just can't play trumpet. And, you know, like, it shook me because I looked up to this person. They were, like, a soloist. They were somebody that people knew. And I was like, they're incredible, and I want to sound like them. And for them to just look me in my face and tell me that you have big lips and you can't play trumpet, I, like, didn't know what to do, like, with that situation. And I was like, oh, like, okay. And I, like, well, it was in an audition. And I just walked out of the room, and I was like, well, I guess I'm getting cut because they told me I can't play trumpet and there's nothing I can do about it. So it was just, like, realizing, like, every time I picked up my horn, or if I had, like, a bad day, or if, like, my warm-up is going bad, I'm like, do you remember that time that person told you can't play trumpet? Like, maybe they were right. Maybe you should, like, give it up. And it's just, like, I know they've never thought about it again. Like, they could probably care less. But I think about it all the time. And it's, like, it's those little things. Just like Alyssa said, with her tights being, you know, flesh-colored, and they were, like, the color of her palms. Like, that's not fair. And the people that were, like, saying, like, you have to wear the tights, like, it wasn't a big deal for them. It was just, like, this is something you have to do. And, like, for you, it was, like, embarrassing, like you said. So it's just realizing that, like, microaggressions are real. And you can say a lot of things and think that you're fine, but it's never, your intention matters less than how it impacted somebody.
Sean?
One of the things that I had gone through in middle school, I was walking through the hallway between periods, and me and this one kid bumped, and he called me a racial slur, and like it was the first time it's ever happened to me, and I didn't entirely know like what to do or who to go to. I don't think I went to my parents for it. I just went straight to the office, like, you know, office is like my safe place, I guess. You know, I'm in school, like principal's there, security officer is there, like that should be where I can go. And I remember on the way there being like, hey, this happened to a gym teacher who so happened to be of the LGBTQ community, and she told me that she didn't believe me because she thought I was playing the black card. And she told me that she didn't believe me mostly because, well, one, this kid, you know, hadn't had a record or anything like that, or, you know, or she had a niece that, you know, said something that was incriminating of someone else, but wasn't true. And she used that minor thing in her life to put upon me and make me feel like I didn't have a say in like how I should be treated and that I wasn't heard. And today, as in, you know, recently, you know, I work on a golf course, and I'm of course from a bunch of white people. You know, it's a state park. It's just like kind of country club thing where you have to sign up and be all pre-registered to come. And I don't know how to take comments people give me because it doesn't feel right to be doing all these things outside, working while other people are having fun and enjoying themselves. And for someone to come up to you once or twice every day and be like, hey, you're doing good work, and then just kind of look at you and then stare at you while you work, and then on the occasion just be like, get back to work if like you're not doing something. I don't know how to take that because I don't know how I've been made to feel, where I am, and it just doesn't gel with me that I can't take things the way that people would like them to be, and I don't know what their intentions are, all because of the way things are in this world, and they might not know, and I try to, you know, learn and forgive, but it's hard to when it's a constant thing of what does this mean? How does everything affect me? How do I stand in people's lives? Because I don't know if my friendship is a casualty or if it's something that, you know, like actually, you know, impacts them, or just, you know, how much do I really matter compared to the average, you know, white person in this world, or the scholar, you know, the person that succeeds all throughout their life. How important am I really to people around me in this world and mattering as much as someone else just because of my skin color?
One of the things that I just would like everyone to know about racism, that's been plaguing my mind for like the duration of this whole thing, is that, and this goes in hand with like the Black Lives Matter movement, there is no neutral. Either you are racist or you are not racist. There is no such thing as being neutral on the issue. And with the Black Lives Matter movement, there's no neutral. Either you are for the movement or you are against it. And I think that if you're trying to be neutral, then that means that you're being complacent to what is happening, which is adding to the problem. It's, to break it down to more simpler terms, when we all learned about bullying in school, we learned about the role of the bystander, the person who just stands there and watches it happen. That is neutral, and that role benefits the aggressor and not the oppressed. So with racism and with this movement, there just is no neutral. And I think a lot of people are trying to be neutral right now, and that doesn't exist.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So I just, you know, like we all go on Facebook and like even excluding like pre-quarantine, like everything happening in the world right now, and like this conversation that we're having, you have keyboard warriors, right? Like people that log online and they voice their opinions, they say how they feel, but like I log on and I see like conflicting information saying like, oh, you know, if you're remaining neutral, you're part of the problem. But then like I just kind of want to ask you guys, like, what is the best way to support? Because, you know, I do also see posts like talking about like the fist is like when, you know, white people start to post that online, that's just another example of gentrification happening. And so I want to say something, but I also don't want to offend people, and I don't want people to think that I am trying to, you know, speak out in a way that's maybe not helpful or supportive in the way that I intend. Does that make sense?
Yeah. If I answer this question, it's going to segue into the next point. Claire, did you want to get your thoughts out on the neutral?
Yeah, I just want to like, kind of speak to white people because, you know, I'm sure all of you guys have seen this. We're all friends on social media and stuff, but I've seen countless white people making this about themselves. Like kind of posting these like, oh, poor me, if I have an opinion, I'm going to be attacked if it's not like the right one, or if I try to stay neutral. Or like someone posted something along the lines of sarcastically saying, oh, apparently just being white is racist. And let me just like say, it's not about you. It's not about us right now. And how horrible that you feel uncomfortable right now because you've made your entire life to feel comfortable because our society was built for white people to feel comfortable. But your discomfort versus their lives, it's not comparable. So if I would say, again, I want to hear your guys' take on this, but don't overshadow Black voices. Don't overshadow, you know, people of color voices in general, especially in this time, Black voices. I've struggled with this too, wanting to share my opinions and speak directly to white people who have, I feel like, been embarrassing all of us. But I think the biggest thing to keep in mind, speaking of white people, it's not about you right now. It's not about you. It's always been about you, but it's not about you right now. It's not about us right now. And we need to listen and stop feeling sorry for ourselves because we feel slight discomfort.
Yeah. Yeah,
Hannah? I just have like a similar question that just goes along with that, and I wanted to ask it as well. Something that I personally struggled with before I started like speaking out was that I was afraid to, one, say the wrong thing. Two, I was really afraid that me amplifying the things that my Black American friends had asked me to not do, or to change the wording of this to be more pro Black lives. Like I struggled a lot with, and I still do, with trying to amplify information that has been given to me and trying not to cover up my Black American friends' voices, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like originally Blackout Tuesday is when we're filming this, just in case anyone's wondering. And the original Blackout Tuesday photo I posted, I hashtagged Black Lives Matter. And one of my friends who is a Black American reached out to me and was like, hey, I am so appreciative of the fact that you are joining in and you are voicing your opinion and you are making sure that we are heard. But can you please remove the hashtag and use Blackout Tuesday instead? And, you know, explained that it was clogging up the hashtag that a lot of people of color right now are using to get updates on what's going on because they can't actually go out in person and be a part of it for their safety. And, you know, I made a Facebook post about that and outlined that information because I didn't know and I was ignorant, and that's okay. I learned and I'm trying to help others learn, but I'm struggling still with helping others learn with the information I'm given, but also trying not to cover up and silence y'all's voices because y'all's voices matter a lot too. So if you could shed some light on that, I would really love that.
Yeah, okay. So to kind of segue to the next portion, white privilege is a thing that exists. And if we're facing the facts, white opinions carry so much more weight than Black opinions do. it's like what Rachel said, where we have to work 2 times as hard to get half of like the payout. So I think in this time, it is so imperative for white people to use their white privilege to help, because we can scream and shout at the top of our lungs, but to face the facts, we live in a white America, and those are the voices that carry a whole lot of weight. And with your added help, I feel like it just makes everything a lot more impactful. And Hannah, regarding your question, I think it's very important for like white people to check in on your Black friends. And I'm not saying that in a way to where, and this is not an issue. This is no problem. We have no issue with this, of saying like, I'm sorry for this, or I wish that things could be like. I think that a very effective way to reach out is asking, what can I do to help you? How can I help with this? Because asking means the world, because it shows that you are trying to make a difference and you're trying to make the right difference. And regarding when you posted the hashtag Black Lives Matter to the Blackout post and then fixing it, I personally, I'd love Alyssa, Rachel, and Sean's take on this, but I personally believe that you speaking up and making that small mistake is better than not speaking up at all.
Yeah.
And I think that in this time, if you do post something and then one of your Black friends reaches out and they're like, hey, try to word it like this, I don't think you should see that negatively on yourself. But I think that we see it and we're like, okay, this person is trying to help. How can I make it more effective in a way? Like, I kind of see it as like white people can kind of be Black voices' megaphones. Like, yeah, just like asking it goes a long way. Melissa, Rachel, Sean, do you guys have anything to add?
Yeah. A little just behind it. And a lot of that, like I've had a lot of conversations with my friends recently that I haven't had before with them, because it wasn't as, quote unquote important at the time. But a lot of them are just like don't necessarily like understand why the riots are such a big deal and why people are rioting. And it's again, like, it means a lot that they're reaching out to me. It just sucks that they can't understand it. It's a lot of like, well, why are they rioting? Like, can't they just do like peaceful protests? It's like, I mean, it's been happening. It's been happening for years. And, people keep saying it, but people need to start realizing that, again, like, not speaking out is not speaking out. That's doing nothing and speaking neutral. But this is a very touchy subject for a lot of people, regardless of whose side you're on. And people are getting hurt physically, and we need to not be afraid to be hurt emotionally as well, because it's been happening for years, and it's going to keep happening unless something changes.
And to like kind of piggyback what Sean just said and what Claire said, it's not our job to make you feel comfortable. And if anything, feeling uncomfortable is a step in the right direction, because you feel uncomfort when you are in uncharted territory. And that means that you are stepping out of your comfort zone to help. That is the uncomfort that ignites change. Also, a good way to support is, I'm sure you can like look up any of these, but like you can donate to certain causes. If you can't donate, then just keep on spreading it, because like I said earlier, this could easily dissipate. And the way that we can keep that from happening is by spreading the word. And if you're like scared of posting certain things, go to your Black friends' pages and see what they're posting and just repost it. Like, I doubt that a lot of the information that you see right now is like all brand new. It's all reposting, but that reposting gets the word out and keeps it highlighted. And also, just to kind of backtrack real quick on how this whole thing is kind of being panned out and played out by media and all that. On media, I feel like we see a lot of the violent portions of protest. And it's always seen once it has become and built up violence. Like the before usually is not there. And I personally I don't think I've seen a peaceful protest on the news, but I have seen countless peaceful protests on Instagram, on Facebook, on Snapchat. Those are the things that we need to be getting out to the public right now. The things that the news is trying to keep up or keep under wraps is what we need to bring to light. And I think that can make the biggest impact. And kind of reeling it even more back to drum corps, because that's how we are all affiliated. I think that starting discussions in certain groups will get those groups to hear it more. And even if the separate groups have heard it in other formats, like this is the Phantom Regiment. And we now have the power in our hands to spread this information as we are right now. And I think it's so important to like just reach those groups, because right now this video is affecting the drum corps community. And Claire and I were briefly discussing doing something with the drum majors, and that affects the drum major community. And just reaching out and hitting as many communities as you can, because I think that communication and education is at the forefront of this whole cause. The protests, that is us communicating that we will not stand for this. The rioting is us communicating that this is not how things should be. Communication is key. And with drum corps, I feel like it's just so easy to come out with a statement and just leave it at that. But that is not how we go towards progress, because statements and things like that they can be chalked up to publicity stunts and just making sure that you're keeping up with the rest of the organizations. And a little promo, but I love the Phantom Regiment because we are having this call right now, and our post was only the first step. And other drum corps friends, if you're watching this, I challenge you to be angry and talk to your drum corps directors and tell them, what are we actually going to do about this issue? Because us saying these words, yes, it's telling people that we side with Black Lives Matter, but what is it showing them? And I'm pretty sure this is coming out at the same time in this video. If it's not, then spoiler. Phantom Regiment is actually creating shirt designs where we have the chevron with the Black Lives Matter fist, and it says Black Lives Matter under it. And not 50%, not 75%, but 100% of the profit will be going towards the Black Lives Matter movement, because we believe that talk can only go so far. We have to actually put tangible evidence that we want to see a change. So yeah, just please help make a difference. Rachel, did you have? Oh, Tyler, did you have something to say?
Yeah, it's pretty obvious that I'm the only white male in here, and with that white privilege, there's also a step above that. That's white male privilege, and it was something that I was born with. I didn't choose to have it. And white people, but especially white males, your voice can carry a lot. And to be complacent is not okay anymore. You know, if you see posts on Facebook, comment on them, educate. You know, it's our job, because when it means something completely different when your own kind is telling you, hey, you're doing this wrong. You need to step up for the right people and the people that need you. And right now, that is the Black community that needs us right now. And a lot of this conversation, I stayed quiet and listened, because that's what we all need to be doing. And then once we listen, it's time to step up, because now we know what to do. We know what's right. And we got to make a change.
Thank you all for being a part of this call. It was very important, and I think it's a big step in Regiment and just DCI's step towards doing the right thing, even if it makes people uncomfortable. To the older generations watching this, your voice in this is so impactful, because more often than not, governments and things will listen to you guys and not the young people who know nothing. So your help and aid in this means just so much more than you think. And for the younger generation, we are the future of this nation, and we now have the chance to craft it in the way that we want it to be. So I just want you to think of later on down the road, years from now, when you have your kids and they're asking what role you played during this movement. Do you really want to look them in the eye and tell them that you did nothing? Just something to think about. Again, thank you all for joining me and voicing your opinions and listening. Black Lives Matter.
Hey.